the other on food insecurity. And so the first is going to be mental health. And our guests are from the Department of Health and Mental Health. And the focus is on what are perceived, we know what we perceive and knowledge we have of health issues that are unfortunately expanding in our community, what the department's perception is, and then what programs you would recommend to deal with the issues that we are dealing with so that we may advocate for it. So our friends Rahman and Yunis are part of the community planning and engagement part of the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. And I'd like to introduce them, and whoever would like to begin, we welcome you to do that.
Sure, I'll jump in. So once again, my name is Mamunur Rahman. I'm from the Department of Health. As Mr. Fine just said, Yunis and I work in the community engagement side of things. We're part of the Division of Mental Hygiene. When I told my mother in 2017, when I entered the health department, that I work at the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, she said, she's an older adult, over the age of 70 years young. And so she said, so you do the restaurant letter grades then? And then I didn't know how to tell her in Bengali what mental hygiene means. So I said, yes, I do that. And then went back to work. So that's really our day-to-day is mental hygiene, is safeguarding the community's mental health. And what's really interesting about that work in the last 7 years now is that you can't really say, here's what mental health looks like and here's what needs to happen. The answer needs to come from the community. So Yunis is witness here that our office has gone through a number of reorganizations and renaming. And we landed now on community planning, which means we plan for the future with the community in lockstep, and then engage with these sort of stakeholders that can help us get to resilience. Because what ends up happening in all of these trainings that we do for mental health promotion is that we end up identifying the sort of disorders and the things that are wrong in terms of our mental health. And it's almost at the end, we say, well, there are resources out there if only you can get connected to them. And so we'd like to turn that a little bit around today. And in the half an hour that we have together in this space, I'd like to spend about 15 minutes telling you about some of the offerings from the health department and really leave the second half of the time so that we all can engage. Yunis especially, because he's a licensed social worker. Full disclosure, he's actually partially my therapist, because we need folks to be able to provide us help when we need it, right? And we need to be able to go to the professionals who do this kind of work. And so given that he's not going to bill us against his license, I want to use that space for you to throw any questions about what you're seeing in the community in terms of the mental health needs. And my hope is that after we talk about what we're talking about today, we have a continued relationship with Community Board 7 where you say, you know what, you gave us the preview, we had a primer, and we'd like you to come back and give us this training on that day and the other training on such and such date. We can have folks in seats or in the little Hollywood Square-like thing that Mr. Fine said on Zoom, and we'll do these trainings, right? So I'll jump into a couple of the things here. We'll keep it loose, and then we'll come back, right? The Department of Health, you're not strangers to the Department of Health. We're at nyc.gov/health. We operate in, I think, not too far from you. We have a action center in Manhattan. There is one on the west side. I don't know the exact address, but we're in neighborhoods in the different boroughs as well as our main office, which is in Long Island City. But really, why does it say self-care before the health department folks go into anything related to our mental health? Is that's really the one thing that we preach in the community, in our office. It's this idea that you cannot pour from an empty cup, right? We're all downwind from this pandemic that they said was going to be a once in a lifetime. And I remember my governor came on TV and he said, it's just 2 weeks. I just need you to stay where you are. This virus doesn't know if you're Black, if you're white. It affects everybody equally, and we'll be okay. And then Yunis and I got deactivated from all of the COVID-related work on April 1st, 2024. I think that's a little bit longer than the 2 weeks that the governor had planned, but that's where we are. In that time between March of 2020 and now, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times as many calls went from your neighborhood and neighborhoods like yours across New York City to NYC Well, the crisis hotline, right? So there was about a couple of 100,000 calls per year that used to come in. And in the first few months of the pandemic, we saw folks calling in like twice as many calls, 3 times as many calls coming in, where some of us working in different roles had to be activated to become essentially telephone support for NYC Well for when folks were calling in for those things. Why? What did the pandemic show us that was kind of a exacerbation of what things that were already there? It's the old wisdoms, right? Aristotle said man is a social animal. It turns out you and I, all of us, were meant to be in each other's company. And when this virus took that one thing away from us, where we resorted to, or we were relegated to these squares on Zoom, it created a disconnect between all of us. And what's the thing that went up? So clinicians like Yunis will say, well, we're seeing numbers of depression and anxiety disorder going up amongst the population. In somebody that was moderately depressed, they became severely depressed. A person who had a little bit of anxiety has a lot more. Or somebody who didn't have any has some now, right? No depression became moderate depression, or the existing moderate depression became severe. Well, that's a clinical term, but really the main thing that the pandemic showed us is that in the disruption of our normal social sort of engaging, the way we were used to living, is that the amount of loneliness and isolation went up. Can we all agree to that? Can we all agree?
Yes.
Really, those are the things that point to depression and anxiety going up. And so in mentioning those things, we wanted to leave this word term self-care up there, is that we need to have at all times a toolkit for self-care for ourselves and the people around us. So I'd like to go around the room and hear from you. What is your go-to self-care technique? Mine is going for a walk. I live here in Jamaica next to Cunningham Park. It's the one place I can go where if I can make it out of the road into the inner part of the park, I feel like I'm in upstate New York. And that makes the noise and all of those things go away. So I'll start from the top. Miss Craddock, could you share with us, unmute and share with us what's your go-to self-care technique? Oh, there you are. Oh, okay.
I read. I find a quiet place and I read.
Excellent. Reading as a form of self-care. All right. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next names. Miss Donahue.
I listen to soothing music.
Excellent, excellent. What about, is it, Rachel, is your last name Labson?
Oh, that's a very good pronunciation. Thank you.
Yeah, what's your go-to?
There are several, but I will call a friend.
Excellent, excellent. So really immediately fighting this thing. If it's isolation and loneliness, I'll call my friend to combat against that. Excellent, excellent. What about Miss Stryker-Robbins? Are you there?
Yeah, hello. I'm gonna keep my
Yeah,
camera off because I'm a little
oh, you're
sick.
fine. You're fine.
But I have a cat and I find spending time with her to be very de-stressing.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. What about Miss Crawford?
I would say going on a bike ride.
Bike ride. Excellent, excellent. All right. And then, Mr. Fine, could you go around the room and collect us some of the answers from your cohort
So,
there?
fine. I do exercise and play certain music. If
Excellent.
anyone knows the boy band group Calabro, I can exercise for an hour with their music and get myself out of a rut easily.
Sweet.
Okay, if you want to
Yeah, sure. For me,
introduce yourself.
yeah, I'm Benjamin Rosenfield. For me, going for a walk, particularly in Central Park, always helps calm me down and keep me focused, help keep things in perspective. I love being in Central Park, and that's definitely a big part of my self-care routine.
Excellent.
Ken?
For me also, it's exercise, either swimming or going for a bike ride with my bike club. So it's a social experience too.
Okay, well, good.
All right. I think, all right, Yunis, what about you? What's your go-to?
Just taking a walk by the highway since I live by a nice little active highway.
Oh yeah. He's in deep Brooklyn. He's talking about King's Highway, where he is
Oh,
King's Highway. I forget what did they create it for? Is like to connect something to Coney Island when the Queen came to visit during World War II. Is that the story for how that road came to be? I forget. So, what's the reason why we wanted to intentionally go around the room and collect your individual self-care techniques? My hope is that folks got to hear what their peers are saying, right? That it's not so hard to be able to go to the gym, like Mr. Fine said, or go for a bike ride, or go to Central Park. If you're close enough, it's not really, you want to hear the things that you don't essentially do all the time, so that we can add the ones we don't do that we heard today to our self-care toolkit, right? Does that make sense to everybody? It's all there. It's all there. But there are some negative ones up there. Some folks in these same kind of conversation will say, well, I'll have a drink every now and then. And those are the things we want to flag, is that exercise is up there, connecting through social media is up there, cooking is up there. All of those things it's possible to cope through your stressors using these things, but it can go in a negative direction pretty quickly, right? So we want to mind where things can go wrong. Even exercise, right? You say, Mr. Fine, so I like to get on the treadmill and run, or I go for a run or something like that, right? But if somebody has severe anxiety and you tell them go for a run, they'll call you from Ohio the next day and say, well, come get me because my legs are jelly, right? So we want to be able to know the norms, know when the norms become a little bit outside of the norms. Now it's becoming something that's a toxic part of our stressors and the things that we cope with, and keep flagging it, right? So we don't need to be a clinician to know a measurable amount of what's wrong with someone, but we know what's norm for everybody around us, and we want to flag if it's going in a negative direction, right? Like I said, all of those things can become toxic as they grow. And the last one there, the thoughts of death and suicide, is up there because we want to remind each other that we can be isolated from each other. We can feel loneliness. But when those things are prolonged over a long time, those are the bricks that build the tunnel where the end is the act of suicide, right? So suicide is never something that's quick. It's something that's been a long time coming. And so we all want to mind, right? And keep in mind that it's a long journey somebody's going through of isolation and loneliness for it to end with such an act. And so what's the time we should flag those difficult conversations around suicide and thoughts of death? Should we have the conversation at the wake for the person who dies by suicide, or should we have the conversation at the very first instance when we notice something is amiss? Someone tell me. Early, right? So early interventions, that's the correct answer. Absolutely. And so in the old days, we used to say there's a suicide prevention hotline. You can call this 877 number. Now it's all unified into this 988 system. You pick up the phone and dial 988. It will connect you to your city's closest mental health resource hotline. And so for you, when you call 988, there's a place in Broadway in downtown by the financial district where the NYCWell headquarters are. They will connect you to the resources in your area. You give them information about even insurance that you have or what you're going. They'll connect you to the appropriate resource that's necessary, right? When you call that number, also they'll flag that if you're a veteran, to call dial another number so that they can send you to the Veterans Mental Health Support Hotline. About 80 seconds, every 80 seconds, somebody who was a member of the armed forces in the United States dies by suicide. So it's something that's really significant for us to flag for the folks who are part of that population. Stress and anxiety, we talked about where it comes from. My concern is for all of us to realize that it's the small things that build up and get worse and worse over time, right? Worrying about self and family is okay. When it goes into panic attacks because it's sustained for a very long time, it goes worse into intense dreams, nightmares, feeling restless, all of those things. But that's when it's becoming anxiety disorder and things like that, right? Not the beginning. Depression the same way, right? Do we all feel the blues sometimes? That's okay. When it becomes this thing that keeps us from our ability to live, laugh, and love, to be able to do the daily activities, to be able to take care of our family, be in meaningful relationships, that's when it's something that we need to flag in ourselves as well as others, right? When we talk about stressors becoming depression, it shows in physical symptoms, right? So who's ever had a shoulder pain that had nothing to do with sleeping wrong or doing activity, doing like manual labor, right? It's our body. There's a mind-body connection where the mind is feeling one way, it's going to manifest in our body. And really, the reason why I mentioned the shoulder and the back is because it all starts here, and the real estate closest to it is the shoulder and the back. And so most of us feel our anxiety and our depression in that way. Behaviorally, right? When it's not a norm for somebody to be aggressive in the community board 7 and they're being that way, you flag that, right? Or maybe the person that's always getting into an argument is kind of calm and he says, everything okay with you? What's going on that, you're all even killed today, right? Emotional things, crying outbursts, things we have to flag in folks that's not normal for them, or even cognitive ones, right? You know so-and-so to be very detail-oriented, they have a good memory for things, but suddenly falling off, what's going on? We have a conversation with each other about what's happening, right? And so in order to build resilience in communities, we bring trainings to you. So they can be full day trainings, 5-hour-long trainings, 3-hour-long trainings. One of my favorite ones is something called the Community Wellness and Resilience Training. We go over what Yunis and I are going to talk about today, but in much more detail. You practice, you share, and then we come up with a organized plan for what's the action plan. So in CPR, the action plan is simple ABC. Check the airway, give the person breaths, and then chest compressions, right? A training like mental health first aid, which Yunis and I do regularly, it's an 8-hour training. The virtual one can be given over like a 4 to 5-hour delivery model. You become certified in essentially like CPR, but for the mind. You learn an action plan to identify depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, psychosis, substance use in somebody, and provide them the initial help and connect them to the services that are out there. We do the same training for folks who deal with young people. What are the mental health struggles that young people are going through, somewhere between eating disorder and suicidality and the burden of social media? We do that same training. You become certified, you get a certificate from the health department. There's even another one that focuses on the Asian American community. It was created during COVID to sort of talk about what are the impacts the Asian American community living in New York City is going through as a result of COVID and the ensuing pandemic. But really, all of the trainings, mental health first aid, community wellness trainings, are things that can be added to your community board's training calendar if that's something that you want to do. But before setting one up at Community Board 7, if you want to just sort of look up, I want to attend one of those trainings, Mamun, at the health department, you can just go to OSET, that's our office, .timetap.com. And then on that website, you will see all of the trainings we just talked about when they're available. Most of them are on Zoom, so you can find a slot, sign up, and on that day, you just attend the training. Or you can bring it to be particularly hosted at Community Board 7, so you'll see familiar faces. We can have more intimate discussions where you know everybody. We can have the conversations tailored toward your community, right? And so really, folks, this comes up sometimes where folks say, you're doing this training, I want to do what you do. And then we say, well, it works with the NYC jobs portal. It's this thing that got really revamped new, where you just put in your information, upload your resume, and then as the jobs that you want, you can just click and then upload the same resume again and again and apply. So it's a really interesting website. It's new if you're really looking for anything to do with joining the health department or the city in general, right? We'll leave our contact information on the chat here if you want to connect with us directly, or you can connect with our director whose information is up here. I do want to leave the 10 minutes I went over a little bit for any questions that you have, anything that's on your mind about what you're thinking for the future for CB7 or for any other continued collaboration between the health department and the community board. So I'll turn it over to all of you to ask questions. But before that, Yunis, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just something that me and Mamun talked about, because we were given access to some of the Department of Health database, which we can always share with y'all to see all the different health outcomes for Community Board 7 and any other community. Something that me and Mamun searched yesterday, we realized Community Board 7 does have much healthier outcomes almost across the board than overall New York City. But the one struggle seems to be Community Board 7 with health outcomes is binge drinking. What's it called? Community Board 7 ranks as, I think, number seems to be number 3 overall in New York by neighborhoods, in New York City by neighborhoods with binge drinking, which in general should lead to unhealthier health outcomes. But like I said, in reality, when you look at all the different health outcomes, Upper West Side, Community Board 7 seems to have higher health outcomes. But yeah, binge drinking at 25% is higher than the overall New York City average, which is 18%. Manhattan overall is 32%. And of course, that would leave that would leave Community Board 7 at a higher rate at 25%. With that said, usually neighborhoods that have higher, binge drinking also end up having more psychiatric hospitalizations. That is not the case for Community Board 7. You do still have lesser psychiatric hospitalizations than the New York City average. So just something to take into consideration, because Mamun brings up the self-care of the community and what do community members do for self-care, and moderate drinking could be up there. But, with Community Board 7, it seems to be more binge drinking than moderate drinking. And that's part of possibly the isolation factor that Mamun brought up. Okay. And just something very important is, you have full access to the Department of Health database for health outcomes and mental health outcomes. And it's something that maybe we'll just send the links to Sheldon right after this conversation as well to have.
Is nobody going to refute that data and say, you know what, that's not true? The government's lying to us?
Quick question, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
How do we measure binge drinking? I mean, what's the metric with which how we measure binge drinking? I mean, do they ask people? How do we measure the rate that people are binge drinking at?
Well, it's of course by case. So for males, it would be around. When we have it in our mental health first aid training, was it 8 drinks per week?
And it's mostly self-report. So folks will talk about, like, this is all ER data, mostly ER data, where folks are asked, like, how many drinks do you have, right? And then if they self-report as binge drinking, so it's not even this thing where it's like, oh, it seems the number is high. It's all of the self-reported data. So we're getting it directly from folks who come into contact with mental health professionals or primary care in the ER setting.
But we have a lot of bars on the Upper West Side, and maybe a lot of those people, some of those people are ending up in the ER, and they're being asked these questions. Maybe that's why the rate is so high.
That's fair.
I was definitely going to talk about the bars as well. The bar scene, I think, in some of the communities, is a big part of the conversation. But it's also like social drinking, just possibly going overboard, and the community feeling more comfortable to definitely have that conversation around binge drinking. Interestingly enough, number 1 is Chelsea, which has a much, bigger case of, party central, bar scene, just to see, while you wouldn't consider that situation to have like alcoholic problems, binge drinking doesn't mean that the person has alcoholic use disorder, right? We want to just separate the two. We're not saying Community Board 7 has an issue with alcohol disorder, but we're saying that, abusing at in one time, people are more likely to actually report that from Community Board 7 and have reported at a higher rate.
It's something Mr. Fine brought up earlier, Yunis. He was talking about the fact that we need to tackle this idea of serious mental illness, right? There was a time in New York City where we just said, well, some folks are going through mental health challenges. That's the issue in the subway. But then you realize in the last few years, there's actually folks with and this term exists very recently now, even in the health department data, SMI. The fact that there is serious mental illness and folks experience these diagnosable serious mental illnesses that are in the population. So when we talk about issues with serious mental illness, right, and a person has, let's say, psychosis where they hear voices and things like that, the first shot might be like, okay, when I take a shot, the voices are a little bit quieter. That person thinks that they solved their problem, that they have a cure on hand for when they experience these symptoms, right? But we know, as Yunis mentioned, the way mental health works and the comorbidities where alcohol use disorder can live together in the brain for a person going through serious mental illness is, before long, you're going to need a lot more of the drink to deal with the same amount of symptoms. And so we want to flag those things, right? That's the reason for bringing it up, is for us to have that conversation. And if our understanding about the bars and the self-report explains it, is one thing. But for those of you listening, if that's something that you can flag in the people that are in your life, maybe your friends, family, or even members of your faith network, you say, you know what, I'm going to keep an eye on that. This is an area where that's the higher risk, and this is the person that I care about. So I'll keep that in mind. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that answers your question, right?
That was your
Ken?
Yeah, that was a very robust answer. And just to follow up, is that 25% rate, is that incidence in CB7 or is that CB7 residents?
CB7.
Ooh.
Oh wait,
Residents, right?
Yeah, it says CB7 residents. I'm just gonna double checking the website because I haven't.
Because I've driven through the Upper West Side. I don't want to be included in that statistic.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, it is percent of adults in that area, Upper West Side area.
Residents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Adults starting at what age, if you don't mind?
It would definitely be.
You don't want to hear that number, Mr. Fine, because we flag it for drinking. It's everybody above the age of 12. And that's the average, the number 12,
That's
because you ask the first sip of beer and then somebody will say 8, somebody will say 16, and the average is 12.
So if we know we have this issue in our community, what's the remedy? What programs are available?
So one of the tenets, there are 5 things mental health first aid goes into. Let's say you bring that training and we do that training in Community Board 7 in person, folks come in. One of the 5 things we talk about is substance use disorder. And the order the course goes is we talk about depression first, anxiety, suicidality, then psychosis, and we end the day with substance use disorder, because we know that substance use disorder is what somebody will turn to if they have a severe version of all of the other 4. It's the underlying comorbidity. It's the underlying disorder that accompanies all the other things. So we make the discussion when we have a training like mental health first aid around, can you flag substance use disorder in yourself, your friends, your family members, or members of your faith network? And then how do we connect folks to services for that? So in a training that you get from us, a discussion around, there's even role-playing sections. How do you begin the conversation with somebody for the very first time who you've never talked to about something difficult like this?
Okay, so we have that discussion, and then what do I recommend?
What do you recommend you're saying to the person? So it's initial help, right? Initial help. And I don't want to give all of that away because I get paid by the hour. And if you get everything today, then that's not fair. But what I'm saying is, we talk about the stigmas around substance use disorder, right? So, you don't bribe, nag, or threaten somebody around substance use. We practice saying things like, I'm concerned about your drink, Sheldon, instead of, you need to get your act together. The you statements versus the I. We learn how to use stigmatizing words and remove them from our vocabulary. You won't hear Yunis or I during the training say alcoholic for an entire 8-hour period. You'll hear us dance around it, say so-and-so experiences alcohol use disorder, or they have a bad relationship with alcohol. And what we're modeling is this idea of person-first language. And so you come out of the training realizing that 1 out of 2 people either is depressed clinically, has a diagnosable amount of anxiety, or is dealing with substance use disorder. That's just the fact of life, 1 out of 2. So if that's the case, then I need to constantly, in the people I care about, look for depression, anxiety, and substance use. So then once we cross that bridge, you say, you know what? Hit me with anything you have. Oh, okay. I'll do the role play on how to have that conversation. So one of those conversations is going to be, you're going to say to me, Mr. Fine, Mamun, I'm concerned about your drinking. Usually you used to have just the two go home. It's 4 and 5. What's going on? Because that's really all we can do is have an honest conversation with each other that's free of judgment. And then you'll get from me, after you do this for enough times with me, where there's an empathy building, and I know that you're concerned about me and there's no judgment, I'll say I'm having trouble for such and such reason, or I'm not able to stop. And that's when you'll say, shouldn't we go see somebody? Isn't it time we went for? And then we'll talk about the local resources that are available that we can go to. But it's this idea of being able to be each other's sort of, if I learn how to do CPR on a dummy, I have that all the time for if something happens at home. And you have that now through a training like this for the people who have this kind of emergencies or challenges.
And we also want to distinguish if the community goes through, because you would know better about the community. Is the binge drinking happening through, people social isolation, drinking alone at home? Or are they social drinkers where they're, like you said, you might have a case of more bars in the area where people are going out to have social drinking and they're binge drinking there? The distinction between the two that we want to understand is because social isolation drinking tends to be a coping skill, like for someone that's really going through a lot of depression, when isolation is a crisis that we go through, for, certain age frames and certain populations. So we want to make sure that that population is not isolated and binge drinking alone at home, because that's tend to be more dangerous than when someone is possibly binge drinking socially with friends at a bar. Okay. And we wouldn't know that unless we're sitting down with the community having these conversations, or it's something that y'all are more likely to be doing with the community, seeing where people are more likely to have their drinks in your assessment of the neighborhood of the community. Okay. Asking questions about where people are most likely to have, a drink. Is it at a bar? Is it by themselves? And how much do you drink alone or with others? And that's the assessment that y'all can make with the community because you have a better relationship with that community.
All right, enough about alcohol, Yunis. We just do it for the antioxidants. All right. What's another hard topic? Somebody give me one.
Oh, just
Any other questions?
Any other questions from anyone online?
You
I
can
was
put
just
them in
gonna
the
ask-
Q&A section also. I have that up here open.
Yeah, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask with that binge drinking rate, is that something that's going up? Is it going down? I mean, where's the trend line on that moving over time? Is that a problem that's getting worse?
Let me see. With Upper West Side, I would say that this, well, okay, I have it also because I opened two things. I opened the New York City Department of Health, and so I have an article. So the data that I have is from 2021, right? That's what the Department of Health data is. But also you have an article over here that I read the other day from 2005, which showed that you were still very high on the list. So in 2005, for example, it was at 23.5% for the Upper West Side. Okay. And 2021 was at 25%. So not a ridiculous increase, but it's staying around the same place.
Now, that the data which we like, if you have a copy of, does it include Manhattan Valley?
You can actually put in by any community board. It's just actually very detailed. No, not specific community. I'll tell you what you can put in by. You can put in like Manhattan. You put 10. For example, community board 7 is 107 Upper West Side. You have about 12 different areas in Manhattan alone that you can be putting in. Which area did you ask about specifically?
Valley, which is the bottom of it is in the upper part of our district, 96 to 110, 100th Street.
I would say we put in under one district because I don't see that up here. Yeah, I'm gonna share it with you right now via. I'm gonna actually put it into like the questions. Is that all right?
Sure.
So you had a question, Miss Craddock. You can ask your question. while we were talking about this.
You have to unmute.
Sorry. There's a lot of concern on the Upper West Side about drugs, especially with so many cannabis shops opening, which are illegal. And do you have statistics on drugs? I mean, is this an actuality? Is it just something that, is kind of a shibboleth of it, that people just think about drugs, and the minute they see a homeless guy on the street, they think they're just on drugs. Do you have statistics on drugs on the Upper West Side, separated into both hard drugs and weed and other substances like that, gummies, etc.?
So
I
we
don't have access to that. Do you have anything, Yunis? We can follow up.
So
You'll get it from Mr. Fine.
So we really don't have access to that, but what we do know is that what the city is doing to combat that issue. For example, as of last Friday, which should start on Monday, this Monday that just passed, the city implemented it's actually the state and city together, because of I think alone in New York, you have about 2,500 illegal smoke shops that open, illegal dispensaries specifically. And we're seeing them.
Careful on the Upper West Side.
Huh? Is that
It
alone in
seems
the
like on the Upper West Side.
I think they said overall New York State is about 13,000 illegal dispensaries. So as of this week, there's been a new crackdown, in which they now NYPD have their own task force, not just the sheriff's department, to close down these shops. And also landlords will be getting around $50,000, of penalty if they stay open. So
Wow.
that's usually the pressure is usually now this time on the landlords, which is different than before.
We'll see if it works.
Yeah.
What about other drugs? Do you have statistics on that? And how would you get those statistics? Arrests or what?
So as of now, I did not look into other drugs. What we can do, like you said, Mamun said, we can look through some different databases for the week, and we can send you resources to Mr. Sheldon. And that was the best thing that we can do for like the next week. I think if you can give us to like Thursday, just to go through different databases for the city.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. That would be, any other questions yet? Okay, please.
Could you explain a little more about the community resilience training, what that
Yes.
entails?
So the community resilience training is a very new one. We created it during the pandemic when we realized that the instances of isolation, loneliness causing depression, anxiety had doubled in New York City. So we start with all of the trainings start with what's the data for the sort of mental health challenges bordering on mental illness around depression, anxiety. What are the numbers look like? What are the signs and symptoms, so that you and I, the layperson, can see that and start pivoting towards, after learning what it looks like, towards self-care and community care. So in myself, when I see these things, here's what I can do. When I see the beginnings of depression and anxiety disorder in a peer, in somebody who's a member of my maybe family, a friend, or a member of my faith network, what's the thing I can do so that we can move towards community resilience? So it's about flagging the signs and symptoms in ourselves as well as the folks around us. And once again, because it's a training from the Department of Health, we do role play. We practice having the difficult conversation of that early intervention, where how do you begin to talk about it? How do you initiate the conversation, and how do you follow up with somebody over time? Because it turns out folks with mental health challenges live with a diagnosable amount of mental illness on average for 10 years before they get help. So it's not going to work just in, practicing how to say, is everything okay with you? And then it doesn't work like that. It may be a continuous conversation we need to have, and we practice those sort of, avenues of staying in the journey with the person who's going through this personal struggle. Ms. Donahue, you had a question?
Yes, I wanted to get back to understanding that your approach is to engage with communities in order to develop what are the right solutions for a community. I wanted to ask, though, in light of what you know has worked in other communities, where are the places where the services that you offer are very much constrained budgetarily, where you have promising activities that you would like to make more available to communities in the city? Perhaps that would be helpful to us as we look at our budget requests going forward.
Sure. So the hardest part for us is finding running into communities where there's a cultural stigma around getting help for mental health, right? So in some communities you go to, they don't want to talk about mental health. My parents are from Bangladesh. The word for mental health is something being wrong with your head. Like this idea of health and well-being around the mental space doesn't exist in the vocabulary, right? So because those deep stigmas are there in those communities, the fight is essentially figuring out how to get them to talk about mental health, right? Whereas in the conversation we're having today, I'm getting a sense everybody is very open to talk about sort of the stressors that are there, the mental health flags, like the fact that we brought up binge drinking, we're able to stay in the conversation. Like, here's what it is, here's what's causing it. So in terms of budgetary things, really that's a community needs assessment that needs to happen. But for you, it would be identifying the clinicians who are in the area who Community Board 7 can recommend folks to. So let's say we have a mental health first aid training. Somebody comes to that training because you had a flyer and they live in the area, but they've never been to a community board meeting in their life, right? But they should be able to leave with, by the way, if you're looking for a therapist, there are therapists in this area within walking distance who take all insurance. And that's a resource guide that is really beneficial to sort of steer your funding into, is let's come up with our own community board, brick and mortar resources. So we can tell folks, you're looking for a pediatrician, there are pediatricians here. Word of mouth recommendation for dentists, there are folks there. We don't have those for mental health, right? We don't have that. You know who you need to go to? Oh, so-and-so mentioned somebody's kid was cutting, let's say. It's a non-suicidal self-injury. It's a type of self-injurious behavior. Well, there are 4 clinicians in this area. And you said it's a young lady. Out of those 4, 3 of them are women who can, help them with this. And I need you to call one of these 3 numbers. And so that's the thing that's missing in most of the communities is a identified resource guide for the local community. And if that's available, it's something that's really good for posterity also, right? We may not be here, but there will be this thing that says, and then clinicians start signing on to those things too. They say, you know what, I need to let you know that I'm changing my practice, I'm moving down such and such address and things like that.
Okay. So we'd like to thank you. This has been almost therapeutic. Mamunur and Yunis, thank you so much for taking your time this evening. We will be in touch around what we need and hopefully a long time relationship where we can be therapeutically helpful to you also.
Absolutely. You don't know how much that means to me. For Yunis, he hears this all the time, but for me, somebody playing this role on TV, it feels really good to know that we're all in this together in the sense that we are each other's keepers in terms of mental health. I grew up in New York City in the Lower East Side where people were allowed to tell me that I need to get home and they, from the neighborhood. So I remember that New York City where these folks weren't related to me. The Puerto Rican person in the corner on Clinton told me, you need to get home. It's 2:38. Like, I don't know why you're still here in the street. So thinking back now when there's this in the intervening 30 years where there's been a rise in mental health, what's missing is that person on the corner telling me, I don't know you, but I know your parents and you don't belong here. You need to get going. So this idea of being each other's keepers, and I hope we can continue to do that for each other.
Okay.
Have a good night, folks. I'll leave you to your presentation about food insecurity. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'll take over.
Okay. That was wonderful. And I really feel like I that this was therapeutic. By the way, just personally, I had first aid, what you call it, psychological first aid training from John Hopkins. I'm a chaplain, so a lot of things I'm talking about were very doable, not just by professionals, but by citizens who want to be trained and get these skills. Mental health first aid was actually conducted right in this room on a Sunday for 24 people. And people are interested, we could do that too. But we do need to know where the services are in our community. I tried, Beverly gave it the really direct thing, and I'm sure we can get that information, but that's one of the things I requested this evening. So we'll see. Turning to food insecurity. Okay, Rachel Labson is with the West Side Campaign Against Hunger. She's the Chief Development and Communications Officer. We're fortunate to have her here this evening. Thank you for coming to us, and we look forward to hearing really what's happening with WSCA. That's different, that's new. What are your needs? Because you're meeting the needs of our community. So Rachel, take it away.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm going to share a presentation, but first, before I do that, I just want to thank CB7 for your longtime partnership. WSCA is celebrating our 45th anniversary this year. And that whole time we've been on the Upper West Side at 86th Street and West End Avenue, and we look forward to continuing to serve our customers. The pantry at that location is our single largest distribution. It's about half of our distribution of our 80,000 plus customers. In addition to our Lincoln Square site in the CB7 area. And so, partnering with CB7 over the years is so important to us. And so we really appreciate letting you, giving me the opportunity to share with you what's going on and continues to happen with our work. So let me see if I can do this correctly. Okay, are you seeing pioneering change in the emergency feeding sector?
Yes, we do.
Fantastic. Okay, so this is a view of our distribution on the street at 86th Street and West End Avenue. So just kind of a quick overview. I think most of you know about West Side Campaign Against Hunger, that we ensure that all New Yorkers have access with dignity to a choice of healthy food and supportive services. And dignity is certainly a very important word in the way that we serve our customers. For 45 years, we've been an innovator and a leader in the emergency feeding sector. And we continue to innovate and experiment with different distribution models that serve our customers in the best ways possible. First and foremost, healthy food is what we do. More than 50% of the food we distribute is fresh fruits and vegetables. And a distribution includes whole grains, lean proteins. It's for a family of 3 that lasts for about 4 days. In addition to distributing healthy food, we also connect our customers to different benefits, most significantly SNAP benefits, and health insurance. And so we reach out proactively to all of our new customers to see if they are eligible for benefits and help them get connected to those benefits. And then we also are leaders and advocates for changing the system itself. We believe strongly in collaboration, in working with other emergency food providers, and working together with a shared voice for advocacy and for making changes across the system so that we can best serve our customers in a dignified manner. So our annual impact is that we have more than 80,000 customers whom we serve across 4 boroughs around New York City, with 4 million pounds of food, half of which is fresh fruits and vegetables. And our biggest benefit is SNAP benefits, which we used to be called food stamps. We connect our customers to more than $2 million in SNAP benefits annually. And we do this distribution through 30 different access points across New York City. So as I mentioned, our largest distribution site is our pantry distribution at 86th Street and West End Avenue. And then we have 29 other sites all around the city. And we do this in collaboration with other community-based organizations. So it might be distributing food outside of Shawn Abreu's office, or in collaboration with Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation, or Lincoln Square. So we work with community-based organizations that are doing everything but food. And so we bring the food to them and become the on-site pantry. And so this is how we're shifting the model. So originally, the food pantry model is that we are asking our customers to come to where we are. During the pandemic, we expanded our distribution through collaboration. And so we started partnering with these community-based organizations, bringing food to people in the neighborhoods where they live. And we keep exploring how are different ways that we can bring food to people. So the first set of ways that we did that was through our community partnership distributions. And this is these 29 different sites all around the city. Those distributions are with customers who are cohorts located in those areas and are also members of that organization. So if you are member with NIMIC, or you are a young mother and you are a member of El Nido de Esperanza, then you can get food from West Side Campaign Against Hunger. Otherwise, if you're not, you need to travel to 86th Street to pick up your food. And people come to 86th Street from all over the city because our food is so healthy. Our food is different than most other pantries that customers can go to. We also have a partnership with New York Presbyterian Hospital, where we do a home delivery program to their patients who are identified as being food insecure and have a child 5 or younger, or a mother who's pregnant, or have a senior 65 or older in the family, and they've been in the emergency room at least twice over the last year. So this food pharmacia program with New York Presbyterian Hospital is another way that we are bringing food to customers. It's a home delivery program. They get to choose from different food box types from their phone. They text the food box type from their phone, and then it gets delivered directly to their home. We're also doing research. We are the partner, community partner that New York Presbyterian Hospital is working with on their research, We have 4 published articles with them on the impacts of the food pharmacy program on food insecurity and on other metrics. For example, the BMI of the children in the families, the rate of the BMI increase was slower in those families against a control group cohort. So when we give our families healthy food, it positively impacts the BMI of the children in the families. And we continue to do research with New York Presbyterian Hospital and their researchers. Another distribution model is called a community hub that we're working with. And this is a newer model where we are working with the community-based organizations. But with this, we are intentionally trying to bring customers who travel from Northern Manhattan or the Bronx to 86th Street to be able to pick up food closer to their neighborhood. So our only what we call open site, distribution site, is 86th Street. Anybody can come to 86th Street to pick up food. So we are trying to create more touch points and distribution points in their neighborhoods so that if they live in those neighborhoods, then they have the option to pick up the food in their neighborhood. They can still choose to come wherever they want to go, but we are creating different distribution models. So sorry, does somebody have a question?
No, please proceed.
Okay, so this map shows several things. First of all, it shows the light blue dots are the 2 locations of West Side Campaign Against Hunger. So the light blue dot at 86th Street is our pantry distribution. And then the light blue dot up in Washington Heights is our new food storage and distribution hub at 180th Street that just opened in January, and I'll get to that. The dark blue dots are all of our community partners that through which we distribute food. And so they are concentrated in Northern Manhattan and Southern Bronx, but they are also based around the city. And then the roundtable members are the red dots. And these are the headquarters of all of the roundtable members. Roundtable members are the Roundtable Allies for Food Access is a collective of 8 of the most innovative and largest emergency food providers across New York City. West Side Campaign Against Hunger is the founder and leader of this roundtable network. And so the roundtable focuses on bulk purchasing and collective purchasing, helping other food pantries with pricing and mentorship. So we developed a purchasing tool where when we are asking the smaller pantries to put their purchasing data into the purchasing tool, and then we will help them figure out, are they getting the best prices? Can they get donated food from other avenues? And so we're trying to help other pantries build their capacity, and helping to improve the system through this purchasing tool. The roundtable also does collective advocacy work. And so as a voice of 8 members, we have had impact on policy in city, getting fresh produce out to pantries. And we've also had collective purchasing savings, upwards of $150,000. And so the roundtable members are working collectively and collaboratively to have savings across our network and to also help other pantries improve their efficiencies and their operations. So this graph is shows our 5-year budget growth. And what I think is really interesting with this graph is that in our fiscal year runs July 1st to June 30th. And so in fiscal year 2019, the blue section is the amount of donated food, and the green section is the amount of purchased food. So in our fiscal year 2019, donated food represented 83% of our total budget of our total food, represented 83% of the total food out of a total budget of $5.2 million. In FY23, the donated food only represented 34% out of the total food budget and out of a total operating budget of $11.2 million. So we are purchasing significantly more food. It's really flipped on its head. In FY19, donated food was 83%, and now it's only 34%. And the budget went from 5.2 to 11.2 million, which shows that we are spending significantly more money on not just administrative programs, but just food itself. And this is because the need is so high, and the numbers of customers coming to Wisca to get food has significantly increased. I know last year at this time, our CEO, Greg Silverman, spoke to this group and talked about the increased need. Well, it breaks my heart to say that this fall and this spring, the need has increased again significantly because of rising food prices, certain rents, and because of the reduction in the government pandemic era government supports. From this fall, from October to December, we served over 43,000 distributions of groceries to our customers, which is the greatest number in any quarter in our history. And it's 30% more than the previous quarter. So this past October to December in 2023 was 30% more than the previous quarter. And this is across all of our distribution sites. So because of this increased demand, firstly, we budgeted for food budget. This fiscal year is 27% more than last fiscal year. But because of the significant increase that we hadn't anticipated, we expect to spend an additional $1 million to $1.5 million on food purchasing alone this fiscal year, over and above the budget of $4.4 million. And then when we look at just 86th Street numbers, you can see that in Q1, Q2, Q3 of FY24, the numbers have just skyrocketed. So at 86th Street, Q2 at 86th Street up the peak was 60% more than last fiscal year at 86th Street. So really 86th Street demand, which is our single open site, all the other sites, we know that we're sending, let's say 150 food packages for 150 families to XYZ location. But at 86th Street, anybody can walk up and get a package of food. This is where we're seeing the spike in demand. And what's really interesting too is that through Q3 this fiscal year, we are shy of we're just shy of 33,000 visits of customers coming to get food in 9 months of our fiscal year. So we have 3 more months to go. In last fiscal year, over the entire 12 months, we served, it's 33,000 unique households. My apologies. We're serving 33,000 unique households. In last fiscal year, in 12 months, we served 27,000 unique households the entire fiscal year. So you can see how many new customers we're seeing, that in just 9 months, we were serving 33,000 unique households. And last fiscal year, it was 27,000. Yeah, there's a question. Go ahead. No? Okay, I thought you raised your hand.
Last one.
Okay.
Is there a way to account for the population that's coming to 86th Street now? Is there any demographic or any indication of why, other than people need food?
Right. Well, I mean, I think first of all, it is the combination of the pandemic. SNAP emergency allotments went away last spring, and that was
Right.
a couple $100 a month more in customers' pockets to purchase food. And then inflation, it's going, money is going such less far when we go to the store. And then the third point is the migrant crisis. I think we're seeing, but for reasons of dignity, we're not asking people, when they've come into this country, but anecdotally, we are seeing many. This past fall, we had a 250% jump of new customers.
Mm-hmm.
And those customers are continuing to come back. And so we believe it also is due to the migrant crisis.
Okay.
So we're really excited that we opened up our new warehouse. I know last year Greg talked about the building of the warehouse, and we opened it up in January. And it's a wonderful way for us to, it's more than a building. It's a way for us to continue to expand what we do, because first and foremost, we have such greater storage capacity. The refrigerated storage is 30 times the capacity that we have at 86th Street. It holds 54,000 pounds of food, which means that we can accept now pallets of donated food. So we've been getting a lot more donated food in pallets already with the warehouse. So if you don't mind, I know we're running late. Would you be willing to see a 3-minute video on the warehouse, or do you want me to move on?
I think move on.
Okay.
I have
Okay.
a grandson who's working with the personally, so I know something about it, but we'll put it off for another time.
Excellent, excellent. But I encourage everybody here to, if you want to come up, I know the board was thinking about coming up and volunteering at the warehouse at some point. We're developing more relationships, and it's giving us the leverage to bring in greater variety of produce and quantity of donated food, and do more with different distribution models. And so, we're really excited about what this space is going to allow us to continue to do. And so let me keep going. Okay. So, what, last slide, I promise. So we were thinking about what do we need? What are we looking for? What, advocating to elected officials is so important. We've made asks to the local city and state officials for increased funding. If members of this board can reach out to your officials and tell them what you think of Westside Campaign Against Hunger and the impact that it has on our community. The roundtable that I talked about that's doing wonderful advocacy work and helping other pantries is looking to expand our programs. And frontline providers in general are just looking for increased allocation of government funding.
Along those lines, if Greg and yourself can delineate specifics with dollar figures, we can include that in certainly our district needs will reflect the numbers and the increase in numbers, but what specifically you're requesting that the New York City Council and Mayor can provide, and we will put it in a district needs statement in our expense budget so that we can give specific, the more specific we are, the more effective we are.
Okay, great.
Because when we do general things, they need more money and they deserve it. Well, sure. But if it's specific itemized and with numbers, figures, dollars, that's the most effective. And we will. Food insecurity has been our #1 district need.
Right.
For several years now. And WISCA is our #1 organization that's providing for our community. So it's hopeful.
That's great. And can you provide some guidance on I don't know if you want to talk offline or, guidance about.
Offline would be good.
Great. Thank you. Great. The next thing I want to talk about is really exciting. It's our annual WISCA Rocks the Block party. It's coming up on Sunday, May 19th from 12 to 4, where people from all over the city come and pack food for our customers and write cards and advocate. This year, it's our 45th anniversary birthday celebration. And so if you can help us spread the word about it, that would be fantastic. I can also send you an email that you can forward to your constituents.
Is there a flyer?
Yes, I can send you a flyer. Yep.
Okay, because we have a website that people go to for one.
And the newsletter.
Yeah, I was going to say we can also include it in our newsletter.
Great. Great. And then could you include in our newsletter our need for volunteers, specifically at 180th Street?
Put it in writing so we can spread the news, okay?
That's great. I can send you something in writing. We're always looking for volunteers at 86th Street. And since we're trying to grow the volunteer program at 180th, people don't realize it's just short subway ride, 20-minute ride up the one. So that is the presentation. Do you have any more questions?
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Please, Ken.
Two questions at least. I understand you correctly, you don't have any means test for the food. I just want to ask that. And also, where currently does your funding come from, and how's it broken down? Is it mostly government? And if so, how much the city, the state, the feds?
So for reasons of dignity, we don't have a means test. Anybody who walks up to our 86th Street location, we give food to, no questions asked. In terms of funding, most of our funding comes from individuals and family foundations. It's about half of our giving. And then only about 12% or so, 10% to 12% is government funding. Foundation funding makes up about 15%. And then we have corporate funding, some community organizations. But you know, the government funding is also now smaller than it's been in the past, because many organizations didn't receive some state funding that we had gotten historically. So we're trying to fill that plug with other giving, but the largest single bucket is certainly individuals and family foundations.
And if you spend all the money that you take in other words, if you had more money, you'd be able to serve more people, and there are more people to serve?
Yes, I mean, if we had, you know, it's we think more about trying to explore different distribution models, that, you know, if we had more money, yes, serving more people is always a good idea. And a lot of what we do is trying to change the system itself. So we are looking into different ways of refrigerated boxes where customers could come and with a code pick up their food when they want to pick it up. So it's looking at how are we bringing food to people in ways that provides a sense of dignity and that works for them, and that helps them get this quality food. And so it's not always about you know, serving more, I mean, more people right now, but it's also about how are we changing the system itself? How are we helping other emergency food providers to build their capacity? So when we talk about helping all New Yorkers, West Side Campaign Against Hunger isn't helping all New Yorkers, but we are influencing other emergency food providers to shift their models potentially to best serve our customers, our community, our neighbors.
Any other questions? I can't see from here. Can you see, Ken?
I don't see any hands.
No, I don't see no hands. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think we have any other questions, but we are very appreciative of your time, the information, your enthusiasm, that is contagious. And we will be looking forward to get those specifics so we can build up our district needs statement and expense budget requests. And we'll do our best to advocate.
We appreciate you so much, and we really thank you for all that you've done and all that you continue to do, because it really is collaboration, and we couldn't do all that we do without your support. So we thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Okay, you too. Okay. So, the requests from both were for, what we can do. So it's tangible, and that's what we need to get, and I'm going to twist some arms. It was clear from the very beginning that we needed those specifics tonight, but we'll get them. For next month, temporarily, this was Autism Awareness Month. Okay, but
I was not aware of it.
you're not aware of it. I know. Well, it's ending, but we have an agency that does amazing stuff with families in the community that many people are not aware of, that will present next month. There are a lot of other possibilities, but if people have suggestions and prefer, any particular topic, with an emphasis on what we're going to put in our district needs, rather than just our interest. On the earlier presentation, I think that we really have to get from them, if they don't have it, what's in our community to refer people to, because if people are interested in the various trainings, we can arrange them, but not at our meetings. Okay, as a separate piece, we have to be able to refer people. If anybody has contacts with Mount Sinai, with Bryan Health Center, with other health agencies in the community, find out what they offer. So, and what support they need, because that's generally where people go most in our community. Mount Sinai agencies, both hospitals, settings, and Bryan Health Center, which is on 100th Street. So with that, do we have any issues, any motion to adjourn? No one, I have to make a motion to adjourn? Someone else can do it.
All right, if you'll second.
I think I'm gonna second it.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, those who are not present with us, feel well, be healthy. Okay, and keep smiling.